all of them used music in church services. And let me tell you, there were a few atheists there. Even they used music in church services. Half of them sang while they were in solitary confinement to keep themselves sane. And they all used music to celebrate Christmas. A lot of them participated in music education, almost all of them really. And about half of them played or even fabricated musical instruments while they were in prison, which is pretty amazing. I was even more surprised, though, to see how many men said that music negatively affected their survival. And I didn't understand how that worked. But 100% of them, not surprisingly, were irritated by Vietnamese music. Anyone here ever heard Vietnamese music? You're about to? I'm sorry. They always had a loudspeaker in their cells, which piped in this barrage of propaganda and music. And in fact, the speakers can be found everywhere in Vietnam. Everywhere, not just in the prisons. Even in tiny villages in the countryside that had no electricity. This is what communist countries do. They control you, even what you hear all the time. So you probably heard about the CIA's use of music to torture prisoners at Gitmo, right? Well, I've discovered that the Vietnamese utilized that method first against our own men. This is Robbie Reisner. During a long stint in the stocks, Robbie suffered the effects of this music torture. He wrote, "I was amazed that I was not hungrier or thirstier. I thought, I can starve to death and it is not going to bother me. No food, water, toilet privileges, exercise, or sunlight, it probably wouldn't take long. The thing that was bothering me the most, though, had nothing to do with food or water. It was the radio speaker right outside my window. It was driving me out of my mind with this loud sing-song music over and over. I was already in a pretty sad mental state, and the fact that I was locked down, could not move around or exercise was tough, but that radio playing was pure torture. It played all day Sunday. In desperation, I began to pray about it. I said, Lord, you've just got to get that radio off the air or else I'm going to come a screaming ninny in a little while. This was the third day, and I really prayed. I became ecstatic that evening when the speaker quit working. The guards came out and beat on it and rattled it around. Every time they hit it and it still did not work, I would say, thank you, Lord. And it never did come back on as long as he was in the stocks. He said it was a blessed relief. How amazing is that? So then there's this guy, Spike Naismith. He said that the North Vietnamese kids screech, the most awful, off-tune noise you've ever heard. Sounds like a bunch of alley cats in a gunny sack. I love these descriptions, they're great. He said, I love kids, but I choke those little bastards that would shut them up. Screech, squawk, screech, screech. After 3 hours of it, he said that his roommate was begging for death and turning a sickly shade of green. And when it stopped, he said, I'd take the ropes anytime. The rope trick would be better than that music. Bad, huh? Well, let's see what you guys think. I'm going to give you a little audience participation. I'm going to play you a little sample of the actual most talented Vietnamese children singing their national anthem. If it starts to bother you, I just want you to raise your hand.
Like it? 3 days straight of this? Is it that? 3 days straight? Oh, lovely. That's even better. I don't know what's going on now. Okay.
So, if you think that was bad, the children were not actually the most hated music, if you can imagine. The most complaints I received had to do with a specific instrument. You might not have ever heard of it, because I sure had not. It's the dam bao. It's a one-string guitar. In America, we have a close equivalent, like a musical saw, if you've ever heard of that. We really don't use it. They're awful. Okay, so musicians described it as atonal, discordant, with a musical scale that is different from ours. Non-musicians don't know what that means, so I'll tell you the descriptions the non-musicians gave me. Fingernails down a blackboard, dishes thrown down the stairs, garbage cans banged together, the most god-awful sound in the world. Some of my favorite comments about it were, My definition of hell is a bad toothache combined with Vietnamese music. The Dan Bao made one want to bury one's head under a pillow if only we had had a pillow. I think that kind of music, if you could call it that, could cause brain damage. And then Captain Ray Alcorn said, as I left Vietnam, I attempted to leave with no remorse or hatred in my heart. As I write this, I realize I was not totally successful. I hate the Dan Bao. So you accidentally heard a little bit of it before, but we're going to use the same rules now. If it starts to bother you, just raise your hand.
I mean, you're lucky I don't have it so loud that it's killing you.
But would you agree it's pretty bad? Yeah. So days on end of hearing that kind of thing would make me go crazy, I'm sure. That's a picture of the den out there. Let's see, where was I? The radio. They also use the radio to play American music. You'd think that'd be great, right? Except that they were using it specifically to upset the guys and to torture them, to break down their will. A few of them found it comforting, strangely, but most of them said that it was really painful because the songs that they chose were specifically chosen as things that would just hurt them the most and then would have this ability to affect their emotions. So things like Ella Fitzgerald's Don't Fence Me In, Tex Ritter's Have I Been Away Too Long, I'll Be Home for Christmas If Only in My Dreams. And after 45 years, 97% still remember specific songs they heard over that radio in their cells. Larry Fries here said, repeatedly they played songs that they knew would make us sad, that we were sitting on our duffs in a jail cell while our lives passed by, day after day, month after month, year after year. Nancy Sinatra's Time O' Time, Where Did You Go? And White Summer Wine. Frank Sinatra's The Town I Live In, and there used to be a ballpark right here. More, all cleverly picked to make it hurt to sit there ad infinitum. Even after all this time, 3/4 of the POWs still get emotionally affected by certain songs that they heard in Vietnam when they hear them today. So it occasionally stirs up anger and sorrow, but most of them say it gives them gratitude because they're home now and don't have to deal with it anymore. Propaganda. This was the most powerful weapon the Vietnamese had. In fact, it's the reason that the war ended the way it did. If you don't know much about Vietnam, I can't get into all that right now, but they were really good at propaganda. And they consistently released these staged photos highlighting their humane and lenient treatment of the POWs. So right here you see them having this lovely Christmas celebration. But don't get it wrong, the POWs did not have Christmas trees. One of them tried to sneak a leaf into his cell to pretend like it was a Christmas tree, and he got beaten for that. But of course the American media bought right in, even publishing edited photos to fit the agenda. So if it doesn't seem strange that they painted clean and neat on the wall of someone's cell to take pictures of it, then just check out Paul Galante's fingers here. On the left, you see the original photo. To protest the fact that he was being used in this propaganda, he stuck his middle fingers out. Life magazine edited it and published it, making it look like he had no middle fingers. His poor nephew thought they were actually chopped off. So this is our media for you. Yeah. Music was also used for propaganda. POWs were filmed holding church and Christmas services, and that's a luxury they did not have for most of their time there. Glenn Perkins was actually tortured into playing the organ for one of these. I would not want to be tortured just to be able to play an organ. I don't know. Some POWs considered the singers to be traitors, but others realized what a great opportunity the services provided for communication. They could actually get the word out, which is the only way they could. So this guy here is Quincy Collins. He's the music man. That's what they called him there. And you can see him in this picture leading one of the Christmas services. What you don't know is that he is singing information to other prisoners from other camps in this video. And he's in his 80s now, but I got a little bit of a snippet of him singing one of his songs, so we'll let you hear it.
175 guys just like you.
They were very creative, I must say. Quincy was just amazing. I got to sit with him for 2 whole days talking to him. He's awesome. There he is again, playing the piano. The guards were so impressed with Quincy's musical abilities that they allowed him to perform over the radio. And he had this show that he called Camp BS. But the BS, of course, stood for Broadcasting System, right? We all know this. CBS? Yeah, okay. He comically translated Vietnamese songs and gave the POWs some good laughs before one of them turned him in and he was sent to a punishment camp. I'm kind of glad they did, though, because he used that time in the punishment camp to do some amazing things. If you look right here, this is a piece of toilet paper that they used there. Yeah, it has pieces of wood in it. It basically feels like sandpaper mixed with a paper towel. It's lovely, but it worked really great to write on. I see you. So while Quincy was in this punishment camp, he kept using his toilet paper and then used diarrhea pills to make ink, and he composed a lot of music, including the POW hymn, the Air Force Academy hymn, love songs to his wife, a Christmas carol. He created 4-part arrangements for every military song and hymn he could think of, and all of this music was passed from cell to cell so the other POWs could enjoy it as well. And then later on, when they actually had the freedom to, they would form choirs and they would all sing Quincy's songs. And then when the men came home, they got to sing this POW hymn for Nixon at the White House. And there's Quincy with Nixon after he led the choir. As the POWs were crowded into larger cells later on in their time, they needed new ways to keep the peace. I told you, 19 inches of space, guys. They're real close to each other. So they created the Hanoi University, and men with any special knowledge in anything would hold classes. You know they're bored when people willingly choose to take music appreciation. Anyone ever taken that class? Yeah, so thankfully they had this really amazing teacher, Colonel Heiliger. He just recently died, sadly, but before he did, I was able to get notes that he had when he was teaching his class in Hanoi. Someone stuck them out at the end. This guy could have written an entire textbook from memory. He was a genius. And the amount of detail he knew about composers and symphonies and music styles and definitions that sound like they came straight from a dictionary, he was amazing. He just wrote all these things. I mean, he wrote entire symphonies out so that people could learn them from memory. And then this is Bill Butler. He is also a very amazing musician, and he taught his cellmates musical theory and performance. He used a brick to draw a giant keyboard across the entire cell, and he had men stand on specific keys, and then he would use them to hum on those keys to demonstrate different chords. He used 4 fingers, tell them to move to different places to make different chords. It's amazing. I've never seen anyone else do that. It's incredible. And then Butler's innovative methods drew so much interest from other people into music that he was able to produce 2 different Broadway shows in his cell while they were in prison, complete with costumes. We're talking like mosquito nets for wigs and stuff, but you know, they did it. They actually put on both South Pacific and The Sound of Music, which they said lifted their spirits greatly. POWs in other cells would reenact movies, and they would have little commercial breaks where they would put jingles in there. And a lot of those were so racy I could never repeat them, but they had a great time, let me tell you. These 2 guys, both very amazing geniuses, they were also some of the hardest resistors. Bob Shoemaker and Jim Stockdale ended up in the worst of the worst prisons, Alcatraz. They were kept in these tiny cells with no light, no air, no noise allowed. They realized, though, that they could communicate by casting shadows under the door in the tap code to each other across a 10-meter courtyard. They spent a month trying to determine the mathematical relationship of one pitch to another, and without anything to write on, determined it was the 12th root of 2. I don't even know what that means. Not all of the music used in the camp was of such high caliber. The men often used music to communicate. Talking between cells was completely forbidden, but sometimes you could get away with whistling. So what my dad didn't tell you about his first time in the solitary confinement was he used whistling to let the person know who he was by whistling the Air Force song and the Tennessee Waltz. Yes, and so the person next to him whistled back the Navy song and the Yellow Rose of Texas. It's a great way to communicate. They also created little songs and ditties that they could get away with it if no one was around. They would sing things like, "My name is Robbie Reisner and I'm leader of the group. Come and listen to my story and I'll give you all the poop." This was a colonel or something, guys. Doug Hegdahl here got out early in '69, and he was able to memorize the names of every POW there because the Vietnamese were not releasing those names. Families in America had no idea if their sons, daughters, whoever were alive. So he memorized them all to the tune of Old MacDonald, came home, was able to sing it to the government, and they were able to let all those families know and give them peace. It was amazing. Howard Rutledge, if you ever want to read a really great book, In the Presence of Mine Enemies, it's amazing. This guy came up with 100 different hymns he remembered, and he would pace back and forth in his cell every day. He was in solitary for more than 5 years. He would pace back and forth, singing those songs every day to keep himself sane. I don't know 100 hymns. I don't know anyone who does. It's pretty impressive. And then we have Bob Flynn. He was the only POW shot down in China. So he spent his entire captivity alone. And every morning the radio there would play the Communist Internationale. Bob was disgusted by it until he realized he could put it in his own words. So he started singing, standing up singing along to the radio with his own words that you can see here. "You rotten vermin of the earth, you filthy slogan shouting scum." Yeah. The people who worked in the prison were really excited, so they brought in all their big guys, and they're really excited too until they realized that he was mocking them, and then he got beaten for it, sadly. This was another song that Bob Flynn came up with. It's too long-lived Chairman Mao, but he made it whiz on Mao Zedong. So this is the verse to it, and then whiz on Mao Zedong, whiz on all his dung. Yeah, beautiful, really great lyrics of him. He obviously felt really close to this guy. Okay, then this song right here is important to me, so I had to get to it before we ran out of time. This is by my dad and his front seater. There was a big thing about parody songs. A lot of guys there didn't know how to compose music, but they knew songs and they could put different words to it. So this is to the song Last Kiss, which people from my generation will know as Pearl Jam's song, but older people heard several different versions in the rock and roll era. But he changed it to, "Oh where could my wingman be? Is he watching my six for me?" So they had a chorus and 3 long verses to that is actually published now. And this guitar right here is hanging in the Hanoi Hilton Museum. My dad got to play it while he was in prison. He used it to lead church services after the war was over, but the guards really wanted him to play it because he would play "I Can't Get No Satisfaction." And apparently they made some crude gestures while he did it, but my dad claims not to remember any of that. So